Ballet Shoes by Noel Streatfield. Part 1. Chapter 1. Great Uncle Matthew and his Fossils. The Fossil sisters lived in Cromwell Road, at the end of which is farthest away from the Brompton Road, and yet sufficiently near to be taken to look at the dolls' houses in the Victorian and Albert every wet day, and if not too wet, expected to save a penny and walk. Saving a penny and walking was a great feature of their lives. Gum, Pauline, the eldest, would say, must have been a very taxy person. He couldn't have ever thought about walking, or he'd never have bought a house at the far end of the longest road in London. I expect, Professor the second would argue. He had a motor car of his very own, and he'd never hired anything. Gum was a quick way of saying great Uncle Matthew. He was a legendary figure in the children, as he had gone on a voyage and had not come back before any of them were old enough to remember him clearly. He, however, had been one of the utmost importance of their lives. He'd been, Pauline once said, like a stork in a fairy tale. He very nearly did bring us in his beak. Storks in the Fossil Children's Nursery were always called Gums after that. Gum had been a very important person. He collected some of the finest fossils in the world, and though many people thought fossils may not seem to be very interesting things to collect, there are others who find them as absorbingly as sensible collections such as stamps. Collecting fossils, he naturally needed somewhere to put them, and that is how he came to buy the house in Cromwell Road. It had large rooms and about 6 floors, including the basement, and on every floor and in almost every room he kept fossils. Naturally, a house like that needed somebody to look after it, and he found just the right person. Gum had one nephew, who had died leaving a widow and a little girl. What more suitable than to invite the widow and her child Sylvia, and Nana, her nurse, to live in the house and take care of him. 10 years later, the widow died, but by then his great niece Sylvia was 16, so she helped Nana look after the house and took her mother's place, and saw that the house and the fossils were all right. Sometimes when the house got too full, Nana would say, "Now, Miss Sylvia, dear, you must not tell your uncle not another fossil until you have gone out the door." Sylvia hated saying this, but she was far too much in awe of Nana to do anything else. Terrible upsets were the result. First, Gum said no fossils would leave the house with his dead body. Then, when he toned down a little and realised that some had to go, in spite of his body being anything but dead, he would collect a few small, rather bad specimens and give them away. And then, after a day or two, during which he mourned around the house under Nana's stern eyes and Sylvia's rather sorry ones, a notice would suddenly appear in the Times to say that Professor Matthew Brown had given another generous gift of fossils to the museum. That meant that men would come with a package cases and take some of the most important, which often meant the largest fossils away. Then Nana would settle down with a sigh of contentment, cleaning those places where the fossils had stood. And Sylvia would comfort Gum by listening to his descriptions of where he's going to look for some more. It was while looking for some more that the accident happened which put an end to Gum's fossil hunting forever. He had climbed a mountain after a particular specimen, and he had slipped and fell hundreds of feet in, crushing his leg so badly that it had to be taken off. You would have thought that a man who lived for nothing but fossils would have felt there was a little left to do when he could not go and look for them any more, but Gum wasn't that sort of man. He had travelled a lot on land, my dear, he said to Sylvia, but very little by sea. Now I shall really see the world, and maybe I'll find something interesting to bring back. There's no need for that, sir, Nana broke in firmly. The house is full enough as it is. We don't want any more carved elephants and that about the place. Carved elephants? Gum gave Nana a scornful look. The world is full of enchanters, woman, any of which I might bring home, and you talk to me of carved elephants. But Nana held her ground. All right, sir. I'm pleased you should see these enchantments, as you call them. But let them bide. We want nothing more in this house. The enchantment that Gum actually brought home was Pauline. The ship on which she was travelling struck an iceberg, and all the passengers had to take to the boats. In the night, one of the boats filled with water, and passengers were thrown into the sea. Gum's boat went to the rescue, but by the time it got there, everybody was drowned, except for a baby who was lying cooing happily in a lifebelt. Gum collected the baby and wrapped her in his coat. When they were at last rescued by a liner and taken to England, tried to find someone to own her. That was the trouble. Nobody knew for sure who the baby was. There had been other missing babies on board, and 3 were missing. She must go to an orphanage for female orphans, said everyone, but Gum stuck to his toes. Things he found went to Cromwell Road. He had meant to bring Sylvia back a present. Now what could be better than this? He fussed and fumed while the adoption papers were made out. Then he tucked the baby into the crook of his left arm and took his shabby old Holden in his right, and rather Dot and Carry One, because his game leg, walked to the railway station and went home to London and the Cromwell Road. Gum, who meant very little indeed, was never able to remember that other people might not be expecting him when he turned up without a word of warning after being away for months. I'm going to pause it here because I need a little break. I will continue, do not fret. This time he opened the door, put down his hold all, and looked around for a suitable place to put the baby. Seeing nowhere but the hall table or the umbrella stand, he called rather angrily for Sylvia. Hi, Sylvia! Good gracious me! I keep a pack of women in this house, and none of them are about when they are wanted. Nana and Sylvia were upstairs making some new sheets. Nana stopped working, her needle held up as though it were a magic wand which should command silence. Hark! Is that the Professor's voice? Sylvia harked, and in a moment she was down the stairs with Nana panting behind. Darling Gum, why didn't you let me know you were coming? Her uncle kissed her. Why should I waste a stamp? Look, he pushed the baby into her arms. I brought you a present. Sylvia pulled the shawl back from the bundle he handed to her, and then looked round to Nana and said in a startled but pleased whisper, A baby! A baby? Nana almost jumped the 2 last stairs and snatched the child from Sylvia. She turned and faced Gum. Really, sir, I don't know what you were going to bring to this house next. Who do you suppose is time to look after the baby? I thought all women liked babies, Gum protested. That may be. Nana was pink with rage. If Miss Sylvia has any sense, she won't take it." She broke off because the baby gave a sudden coo which made her look at it for the first time. Her face changed and seemed to melt, and she began to make noises such as everybody makes to babies, and then suddenly she looked fiercely at Sylvia. "Which rooms am I to have for my nurseries?" Nana, coming around like that, was of course settling the baby's fate. She was given Sylvia's old nursery at the top of the house, and Nana became her slave. Sylvia loved doing things for her, when she was allowed, which wasn't often. As Nana believed in having my nurseries to myself. Cook and the parlour maid and the housemaid considered the baby a figure of romance. "Might be anyone, even royalty, safe from the raving waves," Cook would say in the kitchen meals, and the two other maids would sigh and agree with her. Then there was some trouble over calling her Pauline. Sylvia chose the name, and she said St. Paul was rescued from the sea, so it was suitable. Gum, however, wanted to call her after one of his pet fossils, but Nana refused to allow it. "Babies in my nursery, sir," she said firmly, "never have outlandish names, and they're not starting now. Miss Sylvia has chosen Pauline, and it's a nice, suitable name, and called after a blessed saint. No other name is going to be used, and if you will forgive me speaking plain, sir." A year later, Gum brought Sylvia a second baby. On his travels this time, his leg had given him trouble, and he had landed and put into a hospital. There he had made friends with a Russian shabby-dressed fellow who yet somehow caught the impression that he hadn't always been shabby and depressed, but had once worn gay uniforms and had swung laughing through the snow in his jingling sleigh amidst rows of bowing peasants. The man had left Russia during the revolution, and he and his wife had tried to train themselves to earn a living. They had not been a success as wage earners, and the wife became ill and died, leaving a small baby. When the man Boris was going to die too, the nurses in the hospital were most concerned. "What will we do?" they said, "because there is a little baby in the children's ward." "Don't trouble that," Gamma had answered airily. "We have one baby at home that I have adopted, and we shall have another." Sylvia called this baby Petrova, as she had to have a Russian name, and it sounded a bit like Peter. And Nana thought that if one child was called after an Apollos, the others should be too. Nana did not even talk about not having the baby this time. There were the nurseries, and there was Pauline. "Very nice for Pauline to have a companion," she said. Then she looked at Petrova, who was dark, shallow baby, very different from the golden-haired, pink and white Pauline. "Let's hope that this one has brains, for it's easy to see who's going to be Miss Plain in my nursery." Although Nana was quite pleased to welcome Petrova, she spoke firmly to Gum. "Now, sir, before you go away again, do get this into your head. This house is not a Crete. 2 babies in a nursery is right and proper, and such is the best of homes have right to expect. But 2 is enough. Bring 1 more and I shall give notice, and then where you'd be with you and Miss Sylvia knowing no more of baby than do of hens. Perhaps of what their Nanny might say. But the last baby, Gum did not deliver himself. He sent her round by district messenger in a basket, which he sent a pair of ballet shoes and a letter that said, "Dear niece, here is yet another fossil to add to those in my nursery. This is a little daughter of a dancer. The father has just died, and the poor young mother has no time for babies. So I said I would have her. All her mother had to give her child was a little pair of shoes enclosed. I regret not being able bring the child myself. But today I ran into a friend with a yacht who's visiting some strange islands. I am joining him and expect to be away for many years. I have arranged the bank to see after money for you for the next 5 years. But before then I shall be home. Your affectionate uncle, Matthew. P.S. Her name is Posy. Unfortunate but true. I'm awfully sorry for that. I have a little cold. So, yeah. Let us continue. Okay. The sudden arrival of little Posy caused an upset in the nursery. Nana, who took in the basket, and when Sylvia got in, she went up to see the baby and found her crumpled and rather pink, lying down face down in Nana's flannel apron knee. Nana, who was holding an enormous powder puff and looked at Sylvia, came in. "This is too much." "This is," she said severely. She took a spray of filter earth over the baby. Sylvia looked humble. "I quite agree, Nana. But what are we to do? Here she is." Nana looked angrily at Posy. "It isn't right. Here we are with Pauline rising 4, betrothed of 16 months, and down you pop, this little fly-by-night. 2 is enough, I've always said it. I told the professor so perfectly plain. Who is she? That's another thing I'd like to know. Well, her name is Posy, and her mother is a dancer." "Posy? After the 2 other called as nice can be wholly absolutes? That's a foolish sort of name." Nana gave a snort in disgust. And then in case the baby should feel hurt, she added, "Bless lamb." "Right." Sylvia turned to the door. "Now I know how you feel. I'll make other arrangements for her. Perhaps an orphanage?" "Orphanage?" Nana's eyes positively blazed. She pulled a tiny vest over Posy's unprotested little head. "Who's thinking of orphanages? The professor has taken her, and here she stays. But no more. That's my last word." "Well, I do suppose there can be no more for a bit," said Sylvia hopefully. "He's gone away for some time, perhaps 5 years." "Better make it 10, said Nana, giving Posy a quick kiss. "That'll give us a chance." About 4 months later, a box arrived in the house at Cromwell Road, addressed to the Little Fossils. Inside were 3 necklaces, a turquoise one for Pauline, on it a tiny string of seed pearls marked betrothal, and a row of coral for Posy. "Well," Nana said, fastening the necklaces around the children's necks, "I expect that'll be the last we shall hear of him in some time." She was quite right. Okay, that was the first chapter. I am sorry because I have a little cold, so it probably wasn't the best. I'm probably going to be reading the next chapter quite soon. Okay, thank you.